Hey guys! If you were born a courtesan in the 18th century, you'd arrive not with the unassuming cry of an ordinary child, but in a room already steeped in the faint, cloying perfume of rosewater and starch, the air warm and heavy from candles that had been burning for hours in anticipation of your arrival, their flames bending slightly in the soft draft from an open casement. The chamber itself would be adorned with gilt-framed mirrors that reflected the flicker of candlelight over embroidered wall hangings, the sheen of brocade curtains drawn partly back so the midwife could see her work more clearly, though she'd probably claim it was to let in fresh air. You'd be small, smaller than most infants today, wrapped in layers of perfumed linen before you even knew what skin felt like against the open air, your body swaddled tightly in folds to keep you from moving too much, because in that time, stillness in babies was thought to help form a refined posture in later years. Your mother, pale from both exertion and the fashion for avoiding sunlight, would look at you through lashes darkened with burnt clove ash, the faintest trace of rouge on her cheeks, despite the sweat on her brow, a sign that presentation mattered even in moments of exhaustion. She would be surrounded by women, maids, a governess already hired in anticipation, and perhaps another courtesan friend leaning on a bedpost, holding a pomander to her nose as if to guard against the air, which she might half suspect carried invisible illnesses. In truth, the scent was just as much about comfort as protection, a small sphere of cloves, citrus peel, and herbs hanging from a chain and releasing its aroma each time she shifted her weight. The room would feel both hushed and purposeful, a low murmur of voices discussing your size and skin tone, both believed to hint at your fortune in life. Pale skin, unmarred and smooth, would be admired, not for health, but as a sign you'd likely remain indoors, sheltered from the labor and coarseness of the street. The midwife would announce you healthy if you managed a strong cry, though in that age, healthy could still mean you'd face dangers that no amount of perfumed linen could keep away. Fevers that swept through nurseries, milk that soured quickly in summer heat, and the invisible threat of damp drafts from the hallway. You probably wouldn't survive this, they think quietly, but no one would dare say it out loud.
Almost immediately, someone would dip a length of soft muslin in a basin where warm water mingled with a few drops of distilled rose essence, running it gently over your forehead and cheeks. This wasn't just cleaning, it was introduction. Your skin would be marked, in the first minutes of life, by the touch of scented fabric, teaching it to expect texture, fragrance, and ritual before you could even open your eyes fully. The feel would be both soothing and strange, the warmth of the cloth followed by a cool breath of air as it left your skin, replaced again by warmth when another layer of swaddling was added. Your father, if present, would be an ornament in the corner, dressed more for an afternoon salon than for witnessing a birth, his silk coat carrying the faint smell of tobacco and bergamot. He might say little, letting the women direct the scene, but he'd note your small clenched fists, the way your tiny lips moved as if tasting the air. Somewhere in the room, a maid would quietly replace the spent candles so the light remained steady, while another tucked the perfumed sachets deeper into the bedclothes. These sachets, small bundles of dried herbs and flowers, would remain near you for weeks, not only for the sake of scent, but to mask the other odors of life in close quarters, where water was a luxury and soap a mild suggestion. You are only a few days old when the first of many bathing rituals begins, and unlike the hurried splashes that most infants endure, yours is a slow, deliberate affair, unfolding almost like a ceremony, with each step attended by a particular scent, texture, and intention. The porcelain basin, set upon a low wooden stand, is filled not simply with water from the kitchen pump, but with water that has been warmed over the fire, then poured through a linen sieve to remove any stray soot or splinters that might offend delicate skin. Into this steaming pool, the maid crushes a small bundle of dried lavender flowers between her palms, releasing a faint, bittersweet perfume before tipping in a measured cup of milk, cow's milk, thick and sweet, meant to soften the skin, and a drizzle of honey that dissolves slowly into the clouded water. The midwife, or perhaps a nurse, lowers you in with both hands, her fingers pressing gently against your ribs, her thumbs spread across your tiny chest. The water feels startling at first, a warm embrace replacing the constant confinement of swaddling. You twitch and squirm, your limbs unfolding like pale, uncertain petals. Overhead, the glow of the candle catches the ripples in the basin, and the milk water reflects a gentle shimmer against the whitewashed wall. You don't know it yet, but this will be one of the rare times in your life when your entire body meets water. Daily bathing is considered unnecessary, perhaps even dangerous, so such immersions will be more performance than hygiene. Around you, the women murmur to one another, occasionally reaching down to stroke your hair or smooth your brow. The lavender is supposed to calm you, though it is just as likely to make you sneeze. A few crushed rose petals are added for color, floating lazily across the surface until the maid pushes them aside to keep them from sticking to your face. This is not a bath to cleanse, so much as a baptism into the scented world you will inhabit, a reminder that cleanliness in your circle is defined as much by fragrance as by the absence of dirt. After the honey-sweetened rinse, your tiny body is lifted into the folds of a thick linen towel, its edges worn soft from years of careful laundering. The towel itself has been stored in a cedar chest with sachets of dried orris root, so as it wraps around you, there is a faint violet-like aroma mingling with the last trace of warm milk on your skin. Your hair, what little of it there is patted rather than rubbed, for vigorous drying might make it frizz or, worse, break. The women lean close to inspect your face, noting how the warm water has brought a slight flush to your cheeks, an effect they will later try to reproduce with powders and pigments. Once dry, your skin is dusted, yes, even at this age, with a fine powder made from ground rice, sifted through silk to achieve the softest texture. This is not about absorbing moisture so much as about training your skin, teaching it from the earliest days to accept layers of preparation, to become accustomed to the veil of powder that will one day hide imperfections and catch the candlelight just so. The powder's faint scent of iris lingers, mixing with the lavender from the bath and the honey still clinging to your skin. It is a layered fragrance, subtle but unmistakable, and you are already part of it. The basin is emptied carefully into the courtyard drain, for it is considered wasteful and unlucky to spill such a concoction carelessly. The milk and honey, in some circles, are thought to carry a kind of sympathetic magic. What touches the skin might shape the fortune. As you are dressed again, a fresh length of linen is wrapped around your body, the folds smooth and precise. Over this, a soft woolen gown, hand-embroidered with tiny sprays of forget-me-not, is pulled on, the wool chosen not just for warmth, but for the way it holds the scent of the lavender bath long after the water has dried. You are still too young to hold your head steady when the first feeding rituals begin to take on a form that goes well beyond the simple act of keeping you alive, becoming instead a performance that blends nourishment with ceremony, each movement deliberate, each object chosen as much for its beauty as for its usefulness. The wet nurse, selected not only for her health, but for her complexion, her manners, and even her scent, sits beside the fire in a carved wooden chair, her skirt draped carefully so that no coarse petticoat shows. She hums under her breath, not nursery songs, but fragments of fashionable airs she once heard played on a harpsichord, the tune weaving lazily with the soft crackle of the logs. When she lifts you to her shoulder, you can smell the faint powder she dusts over her collarbone each morning, a blend of ground orris root and violet petals, meant to mask the earthy scent of milk. Sometimes she offers her breast, but there are moments, especially when company is present, when the ritual is adjusted for the sake of elegance. On those occasions, she dips the corner of a fine linen cloth into watered wine, the color a pale blush in the firelight, and presses it gently to your lips. The belief is that this fortifies a child, instilling strength in the blood and warmth in the temperament, though in truth it is more tradition than science. The wine is sweetened with a touch of sugar, a costly indulgence, and the cloth leaves a faint pink stain on your mouth. More often, she feeds you with a porcelain spoon, its bowl small and shallow so that only a few drops of warm milk at a time can pass between your lips. The spoon has a painted handle, tiny blue flowers curling around the stem, and each feeding feels as though it were being conducted in the presence of an audience, even when the only spectators are the shadows of the bedposts. The milk itself might be mixed with a hint of rosewater, an affectation borrowed from aristocratic kitchens where even the simplest dishes are perfumed, because plainness is considered a kind of negligence. Around you, the room participates in the act. The fire sighs, the candles lean toward the draft from a half-opened window, and the air smells faintly of baked bread from the kitchens below, mingling oddly with the sweetness of the milk. The feeding is slow, not because you cannot drink faster, but because in this world even hunger is expected to move at the pace of refinement. Each pause between spoonfuls is an opportunity to dab your lips with a scrap of linen, to adjust your blankets, to murmur some observation about the weather or the latest gossip brought in by a visiting maid from another house. And then there is the curious little practice the wet nurse insists upon. Once you have finished, she rubs a drop of warmed olive oil along your gums with the tip of her finger, claiming it will soothe you and help your teeth grow strong and even. It is not unpleasant, though you do not yet know how to enjoy it. The oil leaves a silky film in your mouth, a taste both strange and familiar. Sometimes she replaces the oil with a dab of honey, pressing it against the roof of your mouth, her voice low, as if confiding a secret to you alone. The truth is that much of what you are given is chosen not only for your benefit, but for the reassurance it offers to the women who tend you. They are performing a kind of magic, warding off weakness with sweetness, shaping your palate to expect not just sustenance, but indulgence. You are being taught that food is not only to fill the stomach, but to please the senses, to announce status, to leave behind a trace of itself in scent and memory. Even the small act of washing the spoon afterward is ceremonial. The porcelain rinsed in warm water, dried with a cloth that smells faintly of lavender, and placed back in a lined drawer as though it were a jewel. By the time you are settled back into your cradle, the warmth of the milk still clings to you, and the faint taste of rosewater lingers on your tongue. Outside, a carriage rattles past on the cobblestones, and the air through the window brings with it a quick, sharp smell of rain on stone before the shutters are drawn. You lie still, your eyelids heavy, unaware that these early feedings are already shaping you into someone who will one day expect every meal to carry not just flavor, but theater, every mouthful a gesture, every sip an opportunity to display grace.
You spend your earliest months in a nursery that is less a place for play and more a showcase for taste, a stage set designed to announce your family's refinement to anyone permitted to step inside. The walls are covered in pale silk damask, its pattern of curling vines catching the light whenever the curtains stir in the breeze. Those curtains are not left to sway idly, no, they are weighted at the hem with small tassels so they fall in perfect folds, and the faint aroma of pomambres tucked behind them seeps steadily into the room. Even before you can focus your eyes, the outlines of your world are being softened by layers of fabric, and every surface you touch has been chosen to flatter the senses. Your cradle, a carved wooden affair with curved rockers, is painted in pale cream and accented with gilt scrollwork that is just beginning to chip from years of use. It is lined with lace-trimmed pillows stuffed with swan's down. Though the swan down is not there for comfort alone, it holds scent remarkably well. Little muslin pouches, each filled with dried lavender, crushed rosemary, and a few drops of orange oil, are tucked discreetly under the pillows and mattress. They serve a practical purpose, or so it is claimed,
keeping away moths and the bad airs that physicians warn might drift in from the street. In truth, they are part of the same delicate deception that defines the rest of the nursery, making you believe that the air you breathe is always sweet and safe, when in reality it is only layered over with fragrance. The floor is covered by a woven rug, its colors muted by candle smoke and time, soft enough that when you eventually learn to crawl, it will not scuff your knees. A carved cabinet stands in the corner, holding your tiny gowns folded in neat stacks, each piece of linen or silk scented with a sachet before it is put away. Even your swaddling cloths smell faintly of rose, a detail that will seem so natural to you later that you will be startled, when you're older, by the plain, scentless fabric used by others. Light in the nursery is carefully managed. In the mornings, the shutters are open just enough to let in a pale, filtered glow, never the full, harsh sun that might warm the air too much or fade the fabric. In the evenings, the candles are set high on shelves to avoid smoke drifting into your cradle, their wicks trimmed short so the flames stay small and steady. The shadows they cast move gently across the damask walls, sometimes pooling in the carved folds of a chair, sometimes sliding over your blankets like the slow tide. This shifting light becomes the backdrop to your early dreams.
The women who tend you never linger in the nursery without adjusting something, straightening the fringe of a pillow, turning the pages of the illustrated devotional left on the table, or sprinkling a few drops of scented vinegar onto the floorboards to freshen them. One of them, perhaps a favorite maid, hums softly as she works, her voice blending with the rustle of skirts and the faint clink of glass from the perfume bottle she keeps tucked into her apron. Her presence is as constant as the scent of lavender in the air, and though you don't yet recognize her face, you know the sound of her movements, the rhythm of her work. The pomanders hidden under pillows and along the shelves are small miracles of their own. Some are made from dried oranges studded with cloves, others from round pouches of embroidered silk filled with spices. They are rotated regularly, for the scent fades faster than anyone admits, and the replacements are always prepared in the kitchen below, where the cook grumbles about wasting good cloves on something that will never be eaten. You, of course, have no say in this, but you are already breathing in a world where even the smallest corner is curated, where scent is not merely a luxury, but a kind of invisible clothing draped over everything you touch. Outside, the noise of the city hums faintly. Market calls, distant church bells, the squeak of a wheel in need of oil. But these sounds are softened by the thick layers of fabric and fragrance. The nursery is a cocoon, a space where nothing harsh is meant to intrude. And yet, for all its softness, it is also a place of confinement. You are rarely taken beyond its walls except for your scheduled appearances in the salon. And when you are, it is always after an inspection. Hair smoothed, linen straightened, scent renewed. Even at this stage, you are learning that comfort and control are closely entwined, that the same layers of care that keep you safe also keep you bound. As you drift to sleep, the lace of the canopy above your cradle trembles faintly with the draft from the half-open door. The scent of rosemary from the nearest sachet is stronger tonight, and it settles over you like another blanket, invisible but heavy. You do not yet know it, but this nursery is less a beginning and more a rehearsal, the first of many carefully staged rooms you will inhabit, each one designed to make the world believe that what lies within is as flawless as the air itself.
By the time your hair has grown long enough to catch the light, the daily rituals begin to include something new. Powder and ribbons, applied with the same care one might devote to the trimming of a rose bush in a formal garden. Your hair, still fine and soft from infancy, is combed each morning by a maid who works with a patience that could almost be mistaken for tenderness, though in truth she is just following instructions as precise as a recipe. She draws the comb slowly from crown to tip, the teeth gliding through with hardly a snag, and every so often she dips it into a small porcelain dish filled with rice powder. The powder falls in a faint cloud over your hair, catching in the strands like morning frost on grass. This powdering is not about beauty alone. The women insist that it helps keep the scalp balanced, protecting against excess oil in summer and dryness in winter. Some whisper that it discourages lice, though others say the real deterrent is simply the scent, an almost imperceptible trace of iris root that hovers over you long after the morning is done. You, of course, have no sense yet of hygiene beyond the feeling of comfort that comes from the warm, steady hands arranging your hair, but already the idea is being planted that the body's natural state must always be improved upon, corrected, refined. Once the powdering is complete, the ribbons come out. Narrow strips of silk in pale pastels, kept in a cedar box to protect them from moths and to ensure they take on the faint scent of the lavender sachet tucked inside. Today it might be pale rose, tomorrow a soft blue. The color is chosen not to match your clothes, but to match the mood of whoever is dressing you, as though you are an extension of their own taste. The ribbon is tied not simply to keep hair from falling into your face, but with the stated goal of balancing the humors, an echo of old medical ideas that still cling to daily life in the 18th century. The act of tying is itself deliberate. The maid smooths your hair back, wraps the ribbon twice around, and knots it in a bow that sits just off-center, the ends trailing down like the strings of a tiny instrument. She adjusts it until the loops are equal, the tails perfectly aligned, then steps back to admire her work. Even if you squirm, the bow will remain, held fast with a discreet stitch so it cannot be tugged loose during the day. There is no tolerance here for the careless look of an unraveling ribbon.
Sometimes the ribbon is adorned with a small sprig of dried flowers or a single glass bead, sewn in place so it catches the candlelight when you pass through a room. These little flourishes are meant to make you memorable without speaking a word, to mark you as belonging to a world where every detail is considered worth perfecting. The scent of the ribbon mingles with the faint perfume from your powdered hair, forming a halo of fragrance around you that others will notice before they even see your face. It is not lost on you, even at a young age, that the women around you also wear ribbons, though theirs are wider, richer in color, sometimes edged in lace. You are being trained not only to tolerate these adornments, but to understand their language. A ribbon placed high suggests youth and openness. One tied low at the nape might be more subdued, more secretive. For now, your placement is decided for you, but one day you will know how to wield this silent vocabulary yourself. The powder, too, leaves its lessons. When you run your fingers through your hair, they come away faintly dusted, and you notice the way the light catches differently on the powdered strands. It makes your hair feel softer, but it also makes it behave differently, holding its shape with more obedience. If a stray wisp escapes, it is quickly smoothed back into place with the flat of the maid's palm, leaving behind the faint trace of powder on her skin. By the time the ribbon is tied and the last bit of powder shaken from the comb, the morning feels officially begun. You are lifted from your chair, your gown straightened, and you are declared ready to be seen, even if being seen means nothing more than toddling about the nursery or sitting quietly in a corner while your mother receives visitors. You carry with you the quiet knowledge that this process will happen again tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that, until it becomes as natural as breathing. Outside, the weather might be wet or dry, the street loud or silent, but inside your world, the rituals are constant. Powder and ribbons will follow you for years, sometimes in different colors, sometimes with different scents, but always with the same underlying message. You are to be presented, not merely to exist. And every morning, as the ribbon is tightened into its bow and the powder settles into your hair, you learn a little more about how to hold still,
how to be arranged, how to look as though you were born not into the world, but into the role you are expected to play within it.
By the time you were old enough to waddle steadily from one end of the nursery to the other, the daily preparations have expanded to include yet another fragrant layer: miniature perfumes, applied as carefully as if you were about to be presented at court. The bottles themselves are tiny, meant for small hands to admire rather than to hold, their glass faceted so the candlelight scatters across the nursery walls in soft fragments. They rest on a silver tray lined with linen, each one labeled in looping script: Eau de fleur d'orange, Eau de jasmine, Eau de violette, diluted for a child, but still carrying the unmistakable weight of luxury. The ritual begins after your hair has been powdered and your ribbons tied, when the maid selects one of the bottles according to the day's mood or occasion. A guest visiting the salon might mean orange blossom for brightness. A quiet afternoon indoors might call for violet's soft melancholy. The stopper is lifted, and the liquid within releases a small, concentrated bloom of scent, sharp for an instant before it mellows. A few drops are poured into a porcelain cup, then dabbed onto your neck, wrists, and even behind your ears with a square of folded linen. The touch is cool at first, then warm as the alcohol evaporates, leaving behind only the lingering perfume. There is a practical reason for this habit, though it is rarely admitted aloud. Bathing is not a daily occurrence in your world. Water, particularly in cold months, is something to be used with care, and so scent becomes the way to maintain the appearance and illusion of cleanliness. A child who smells of orange blossom cannot possibly be thought of as unkempt, even if the last proper washing happened days ago. And so the perfume is as much a disguise as it is an adornment, a way of dressing the air around you so that it says nothing of what might be hidden beneath. You soon learn to expect this cooling touch each morning, to tilt your head slightly so the drops fall exactly where they should. On rare occasions, your small hand is guided toward the bottle itself, allowing you to tip it just enough to release a drop onto your own skin. It is a gesture both thrilling and forbidden, for too much could be seen as wasteful, and wastefulness is a vice reserved for those with far more influence than a child in a silk gown. Still, when you catch the faint whiff of perfume rising from your wrist later in the day, it feels like a secret you are carrying just for yourself.
Sometimes the scent is refreshed in the middle of the day, particularly if you have been playing near the window where the wind might disturb the carefully arranged air. A maid will come in quietly, lift you onto a stool, and repeat the process, murmuring something about keeping you presentable. Presentable, you begin to understand, is not about the state of your hair or clothes alone, but about the invisible aura you carry into a room, the faint cloud of fragrance that announces you before you speak and lingers for a moment after you leave. You notice, too, that the women around you have their own preferred scents, and you begin to associate them with their presence. Your mother with jasmine, the governess with rosemary and lemon, the maid with violet water, so diluted it is almost imaginary. These scents mingle in your memory with the clink of glass, the whisper of fabric, the cool weight of a linen cloth against your skin. Even before you can name them, you know them. The way you know the sound of the floorboard that creaks just outside the nursery door. The bottles are cared for as though they were living things. They are polished until they catch the light, their stoppers checked for chips, the liquid inside watched closely for any sign of clouding. When a bottle is nearly empty, it is refilled not from a crude jug, but from another, larger bottle, kept in a locked cabinet, the key to which hangs from your mother's chatelaine. You are told that these perfumes come from far away, some from Grasse in the south of France, others from even more distant places whose names sound like parts of a dream. You cannot imagine such journeys, but you can imagine the ship's hold, filled with tiny bottles, rocking gently with the waves until they reach your world.
By the time the scent has settled on your skin and in the folds of your gown, you are ready for the day's next display, whether it be a walk through the salon or simply sitting quietly with a book of illustrations in your lap while the adults speak above your head. You carry the perfume with you as if it were part of your own breath, not knowing yet that it is, in fact, the first mask you have learned to wear, one made not of cloth or powder, but of air itself.
You are barely past the stage of toddling when another curious part of your daily routine is introduced: corseted beginnings, the moment when the soft, unstructured comfort of your gowns gives way to the gentle but unyielding grip of tiny stays. At first glance, they look almost like a doll's garment, cut from pale linen with whalebone channels sewn neatly between the layers, their edges bound in ribbon. Yet when the maid slips them around your torso, the sensation is anything but toy-like. The stays hug you snugly, the laces at the back pull just enough to make you aware of your own shape, to draw your shoulders back and your spine straight, long before you understand the reasons given for it. The explanation, of course, is posture. Everybody says so. Good posture builds good health, they murmur as they smooth the fabric flat against your chest. But in the half-smiles exchanged over your head, you might detect a different truth, that this shaping is not only about standing tall, but about setting the foundation for a figure that will be considered pleasing in years to come. For now, the lacing is loose enough that you can breathe easily, though you feel the gentle tug every time you bend forward, a reminder to keep movements graceful. The stays are worn over your chemise, which is always freshly laundered and faintly scented with rosemary water from the rinse. They are tied each morning with a ribbon chosen to match your gown, so that if the top should slip, the glimpse will still look deliberate. Sometimes the ribbon is a soft pink, other days a pale cream, and once, on a day when your mother is feeling particularly pleased, a daring deep blue. The act of lacing is slow, the maid pulling each loop in sequence until the fabric rests against you like a second skin. The faint creak of whalebone is something you come to associate with readiness, the way other children might think of the fastening of shoes. Moving in stays is different. You can no longer twist as you please, and the quick, playful bends of your early childhood become measured turns. When you sit, you do so with your back a little straighter. When you stand, your chest is lifted slightly without your willing it. At first, it feels strange, but soon you forget what it was to slump entirely, and the world begins to seem arranged for this new posture, as if chairs were made to be perched upon, not lounged in, and as if walking were a series of small, deliberate displays rather than a means of getting somewhere.
There are practicalities to consider, too. The stays are not washed often. Instead, they are aired out by an open window, the breeze carrying away any faint trace of the day's wear. To refresh them, the maid sometimes sprinkles the inside lightly with a mixture of powdered iris root and finely sifted rice flour, both to absorb moisture and to add a whisper of scent. When you put them on again the next day, they smell faintly of flowers, though the memory of yesterday's warmth still lingers in the fabric. It is a curious mixture of comfort and constraint. You are told that girls of good breeding begin this early, while others wait until their bodies are more formed. There is an unspoken implication that starting young ensures the body will grow to fit the ideal, much like shaping a sapling before it becomes a tree. You don't yet think of your body as something to be shaped at all, but you do notice that your reflection in the mirror looks a little more like the women around you when the stays are on. Your shoulders pulled back, your waist hinted at even in its childish roundness. On days when the lacing feels tighter than usual, you are encouraged to take smaller breaths and move with more care, under the guise of learning elegance. And though no one says it outright, you sense that this mild discomfort is considered a kind of training, not merely for the body, but for the mind. To endure the tug of the stays without fuss is to prove you can carry the quiet burdens expected of you later. By evening, when the laces are loosened and the stays lifted away, your chemise feels almost weightless in comparison, and you breathe a little deeper without thinking.
The faint marks on your skin from the seams fade within minutes, but their ghost remains in your awareness. Lying in your cradle, you feel as though your body still remembers the shape it was held in all day, a lingering impression of structure that even sleep cannot entirely smooth away. You do not yet know that these small beginnings are part of a longer arc, one that will see the stays grow taller, the lacing tighter, and the expectation of grace more exacting. For now, you simply accept them as another layer in the daily pageant, another scented, stitched reminder that your body, like your gowns, your hair, and your very presence, is being prepared, piece by piece, for a role you were given before you could walk.
The stays have barely become familiar when another element is added to your days. Fan etiquette lessons, which at first sound like a kind of game, but quickly reveal themselves to be yet another step in the long training of how you are to be seen. It begins with your governess, a woman whose posture seems carved from marble and whose voice rarely rises above a soft, measured tone. She enters the nursery carrying a small folded fan in one hand and a scented handkerchief in the other, the air around her tinged with the rich, spiced sweetness of cloves. You catch the scent each time she moves, for she keeps the handkerchief close to her face, a habit she insists is as much about avoiding foul airs as about keeping her own breath pleasant. She sits on the low-cushioned seat near your chair and opens the fan slowly, the sticks unfolding with a faint click, the painted silk surface spreading like the wing of a bird. The fan is decorated with tiny pastoral scenes, shepherds and ladies, a sky streaked with improbable pink clouds, and edged in gilt that catches the light. You are told to watch closely, for the fan is more than a tool to stir the air. It is a language, a conversation in gestures. At first, you learn the simplest motions, how to hold it by the rivet so it pivots easily, how to open it with a smooth flick rather than an awkward snap, how to close it without catching the silk. Your fingers are still small, and the fan feels heavier than it looks, the weight of its carved sticks pressing lightly into your palm. When you drop it, as you inevitably do, the governess retrieves it without scolding, only remarking that even the most graceful ladies had to learn their poise one drop at a time. Between demonstrations, she presses the clove-scented handkerchief to her nose and passes it to you, instructing you to do the same. The sharp, warm aroma fills your senses, masking the faint mustiness of the closed nursery. Always carry your own air, she says softly, as if confiding a secret, for the world will rarely offer you one worth breathing. You do not fully understand, but the habit begins to root itself in your mind, that carrying fragrance is as necessary as carrying clothing.
The lessons expand to include gestures with meaning. Holding the fan closed and tapping it lightly against your lips suggests thoughtfulness. Opening it wide and fanning slowly signals disinterest. Fluttering it more quickly might suggest nervousness, or, in the more private code between certain ladies, impatience. You are far too young to need such signals, but you repeat them dutifully, giggling when your motions come out exaggerated. The governess never quite laughs with you, though a faint smile sometimes tugs at the corner of her mouth. Occasionally, your mother joins the lesson, bringing with her a fan of her own, larger, lighter, with silk so fine it seems almost transparent. She sits beside you and mirrors your motions, her bracelets chiming softly each time she moves. She corrects your grip, smoothing your fingers over the sticks, and tells you how in certain salons a single flick of a fan could draw attention more effectively than a shouted word. In those moments, you begin to sense that the fan is not just for cooling oneself, nor even for the private code of glances and gestures. It is a prop, a stage piece, part of the constant performance that shapes every interaction in the world you are being prepared to enter. The scent of cloves never leaves these sessions.
Sometimes it is joined by a faint hint of rosewater, if your mother has brought her own handkerchief, or by the musk of the governess's wool shawl when she leans close to adjust your elbow. The mixture becomes inseparable from the lessons themselves, so that later, even catching a trace of clove in a crowded room will summon the image of the painted silk unfolding in your hands. By the end of each practice, your fingers are faintly stiff from holding the fan in unfamiliar positions, but you are always told you've done well, even if you've dropped it 3 times in as many minutes. The fan is folded and placed back in its silk case, the handkerchief returned to the governess's pocket. The session ends not with applause, but with a reminder to sit still for a moment, to feel the quiet after the movement, as though stillness itself is part of the language you're learning. And so, while other children might spend their afternoons chasing each other across open fields, you spend yours learning how to speak without words, your small hands carrying the weight of a painted fan and the scent of cloves. It seems a small thing now, another game among many, but it is also one more piece in the invisible structure rising around you, teaching you that grace is never accidental, and that even the simplest gestures can be rehearsed until they look like instinct.
You are still young enough to find delight in the feel of someone else's hands in your hair when a new ritual begins. Early hair pomades, those rich, sticky concoctions that promise to keep every curl in place and every strand gleaming under candlelight. The first time the maid brings out the small jar, its lid sealed tight with a band of waxed cloth, you catch a faint, heavy fragrance before it's even opened. Inside is a pale, buttery paste, the color of clouded cream, made from bear fat rendered until smooth and blended with a generous portion of jasmine oil. It glistens in the light, dense enough to hold the shape of a spoon. The maid dips 2 fingers in, working the pomade between her palms until it softens with her warmth. You feel her fingers slide through your hair, starting at the roots and smoothing outward, coaxing the fine strands into place. The sensation is almost like the afterglow of a bath, warm, enveloping, deliberate. The jasmine scent blooms in the air around you, sweet and faintly exotic, mingling with the powder from earlier in the morning. It's not unpleasant, but there's no ignoring the way it clings, the way it seems to settle into every fold of your gown and every corner of the room. The stated reason for the pomade is to protect your hair, to keep it from becoming brittle in the dry winter air or frizzing in summer dampness. But the unspoken truth is simpler. A well-groomed head of hair reflects well on the household. Stray wisps suggest neglect. A smooth, gleaming finish signals care, discipline, and resources. Even on days when no visitors are expected, the pomade is applied, because the point is not to look prepared for someone, it's to always be prepared, as though the right pair of eyes might arrive at any moment. Of course, the pomade comes with its quirks. The jasmine oil draws the attention of every curious housefly in Paris, and the warmth of the nursery only makes the scent travel farther. Now and then, you feel the faint tickle of a fly daring to land too close, only to be waved away by a handkerchief or by the maid's quick breath. You were told to keep still while your hair is arranged, but you are allowed a little laugh when the flies prove persistent. It's the rare part of the ritual that permits movement. Once the pomade is worked in, the maid takes up a brush with bristles made from boar hair, its handle polished to a soft sheen from years of use. She brushes with long, steady strokes, the kind that seem designed to smooth both hair and mind. She counts them under her breath, a habit she might not even be aware of, and you begin to recognize the rhythm, each stroke from crown to tip, each return to the jar for a touch more pomade, each pause to tuck a curl behind your ear. The air grows heavier with scent as the minutes pass, until you feel as though you are wearing a cloud of jasmine and warm musk on your head. Sometimes, on special days, the pomade is altered. A drop of bergamot oil might be added for brightness, or crushed rose petals for color, turning the pale paste a faint pink.
The jar is small enough that each variation feels precious, like a secret recipe meant only for you. You notice, too, that the women around you have their own jars, their own blends, and that they guard them carefully, as if a hair pomade were as much a signature as a perfume. By the time the process is finished, your hair is glossy, obedient, and arranged into soft curls that rest neatly against your cheeks or gather at the nape of your neck. The maid wipes her hands with a scrap of linen kept for that purpose, then folds it and tucks it away until the next day, when it will bear the faint perfume of today's pomade. You feel the weight of the styling, not in the sense of heaviness, but in the awareness of something holding you, shaping you. You are told not to touch your hair during the day, though you inevitably forget, your fingers finding the softness when you are distracted. Each time, you're reminded that the pomade's magic lasts longest when left undisturbed, and so you learn, slowly, to carry yourself with a kind of care that protects the work already done. It's a lesson that will follow you far beyond the nursery. The idea that beauty, once achieved, is something to be maintained with vigilance, not tested with carelessness. As you go about your day, the scent of jasmine drifts with you, marking your passage through each room. You do not yet know how much the world notices these trails of perfume, or how often they are remembered long after the person is gone. But you will in time. For now, the pomade is simply another part of the morning's quiet theater, a glossy signature brushed into your hair before you step back into the daily performance of being seen.
By now, you have learned to sit still for hair pomades, to tilt your head for perfume, to tolerate the gentle tug of stays and the tickle of powder. But there is another ritual, one both simple and strangely indulgent, that becomes a part of your daily life. Sweetened breath. You are far too young to worry about your own scent, but in your world, freshness is not confined to skin and hair. The mouth, too, must carry a pleasing trace, as though every word you might one day speak should arrive wrapped in sugar and flowers. The practice begins after the morning's preparations are complete, often just before you are brought into the salon or led to sit beside your mother during a visit. A small porcelain dish is set on the table, its lid painted with roses or gilded scrolls. Inside are crystallized violets, fragile petals preserved in sugar until they glisten like tiny shards of amethyst, and sugar-coated anise seeds, pale and glimmering, each one no larger than a pearl. The scent is immediate when the lid is lifted, a delicate mingling of floral sweetness and warm spice, almost enough to make you lean forward on instinct. The governess, or sometimes your mother herself, selects one piece for you, placing it on your tongue with deliberate care. The sugar crunches softly between your teeth before melting into a sweetness that carries the faint, ghost-like taste of the flower it holds. The violets dissolve more quickly, leaving only the memory of their perfume, while the anise seeds linger, warming your mouth with a gentle spice that seems to fill your whole head. You are told to let them rest on your tongue rather than bite too quickly, for this is not a treat to be devoured, but a refinement to be savored. The stated reason for this habit is to freshen the breath, as if a child's mouth could already carry some offense. In truth, it is part of the same long apprenticeship in presentation that has shaped every other detail of your day. A sweetened breath is a silent signal, proof that you are cared for, that your presence has been considered from every angle, even the one that cannot be seen. It is also, though no one says it aloud, a habit meant to prepare you for a future where every word you speak might be weighed,
where even the air between your lips must please. Sometimes the treat changes. In spring, there might be rose petals preserved in syrup and dried until they curl into delicate spirals. In winter, slivers of candied orange peel dusted with sugar, their bitterness softened but not erased. These, too, are chosen for scent as much as flavor. The goal is not to satisfy hunger, but to leave behind a trace that lingers when you speak or laugh.
The preparation of these sweets is its own small theater. You once caught a glimpse of the kitchen maid making a batch of crystallized violets, each petal painted carefully with beaten egg white and sprinkled with sugar so fine it drifted through the air like frost. They were laid out to dry on trays lined with linen, their scent filling the room with a sweetness so sharp it made you dizzy. You learned then that what you put into your mouth had already been handled with as much care as the ribbons in your hair. The ritual is never rushed. Even on days when the household is busy, someone always remembers to lift the porcelain lid and choose something for you. The moment is small, but it feels like a punctuation mark at the end of the morning's preparations, a last, delicate adjustment before you were deemed ready to be seen. The sugar sometimes leaves a faint dusting at the corners of your mouth, which is quickly dabbed away with a handkerchief, as though imperfection could not be allowed to linger, even for a breath. And as you step into the salon, the sweetened air you carry is invisible, yet present, drifting just far enough for those near you to notice without quite identifying its source. You will not know until much later how such details shape impressions, how the smallest indulgence can become a kind of invisible jewelry. For now, you simply enjoy the moment when the sugar begins to melt, when the scent of violet or anise blooms at the back of your throat, and when you feel, in some unspoken way, that even your breath has been dressed for the occasion. You have grown accustomed to the scent that hovers around you, to the sweetness that lingers on your breath, and to the faint grip of stays at your waist. Now comes another lesson, one that seems almost ordinary in name, but is, like everything else in your world, treated as an art: the washing of your face. In other households, this might mean splashing cold water from a basin and wiping it away with a coarse towel. But here, even the simplest cleansing is an orchestrated ritual, as much about texture and scent as about removing the dust of the day. The water for this purpose is never just water. The maid fetches it early, while it is still cool from the morning, and leaves it to settle in a porcelain bowl patterned with tiny green leaves. A cloth of fine linen, so tightly woven it feels almost like silk, is folded beside it. Into the water, a spoonful of rainwater vinegar is poured, clear as glass, with a faint bite that softens as it mingles with the water. The vinegar is said to brighten the complexion and to keep the skin free of blemishes, though its sharp scent is tamed by a few drops of rosewater or orange blossom distilled in the still room. You are seated before the basin, your chin tilted by a light touch under the jaw. The linen is dipped, wrung just enough to keep it from dripping, and then pressed gently against your skin. The first touch is always cool, almost startling, before it warms under the heat of your face. The maid begins at your forehead, moving in small, deliberate strokes toward your temples, across your cheeks, and down along your jawline. Each pass seems less about cleaning than about coaxing the skin awake, as if each curve of the cloth's movement is a whisper meant to remind your face of its shape. Special care is taken to avoid disturbing the kohl that darkens your lashes and rims your eyes. Though less common now than in your mother's youth, the faint line remains fashionable, lending the eyes a depth admired in candlelit rooms. The linen cloth is folded and turned so that only its clean edges touch your skin,
and you are warned not to rub at your own eyes for fear of smudging the delicate line into something untidy. If a trace of powder from your cheeks is lifted away, it is quickly replaced with a light dusting after the wash is complete.
The process is slow enough that you have time to notice other things. The faint creak of the chair beneath you, the smell of the vinegar mixing with the softer scent of flowers, the way the damp cloth cools your skin in some places while others remain warm. Occasionally, a stray droplet slides onto your chin, where it is caught with the tip of the maid's finger before it can fall onto your gown. Once the face is fully cleansed, a second linen is used to pat the skin dry. Never rubbed, for that would be too harsh. This cloth has been stored in a drawer with sprigs of dried lemon balm, and when it touches your cheeks, the scent rises faintly. Your skin is left neither wet nor entirely dry, but in that curious state of freshness that feels as though the air itself has changed. A small pot of unguent is then produced, its lid lifted to release the aroma of almond oil and beeswax. A dab is worked into your temples and across the cheekbones, not enough to shine, but just enough to leave a softness when the light catches your skin. You are told that this ritual should be repeated every morning and evening, though the evening wash is sometimes shortened if the household is busy. The point, it seems, is not to chase away dirt so much as to keep the face ready for whatever layers might be applied next: powder, rouge, a touch of scent. Your skin is the canvas on which the day is painted, and even a child's face must be kept in readiness, as though an unexpected guest might appear at any moment. When the bowl is carried away and the linens placed in a basket for laundering, you are left with the lingering tingle of vinegar on your skin and the faint sweetness of rose or orange blossom in your nose. You do not yet understand how rare it is to have one's face washed in this way, or how this gentle ritual ties you to a world that prizes appearance over comfort. But you are learning, without words, that even the smallest corner of yourself must be arranged, polished, and guarded like the delicate silk that hangs in the windows. Your cheeks, still round with youth, have never known the harsh winds of winter without a veil of cloth, or the full glare of summer without a parasol. Yet the women around you insist there is always room for improvement. And so, long before you can imagine the need for it, you are introduced to rouge. It is not the heavy mask worn by certain ladies at masked balls, nor the bold streaks that mark an actress on the stage, but something gentler, a touch of health, as your mother calls it, though it is more about perception than well-being. The rouge itself comes in a small, shallow pot made of enamel, its lid painted with a pastoral scene that has begun to fade from handling. Inside, the pigment, carmine derived from cochineal insects, is pressed into a fine cake, its deep rose color softened by a mixture of talc and a hint of powdered pearl. To prepare it, the maid dampens the tip of a square of linen in rosewater, just enough to lift the pigment without crumbling it. Then, with a hand as steady as if she were painting porcelain, she dabs the color onto the apples of your cheeks. The sensation is feather light, but you can feel the cool dampness of the cloth, the faint tug as it presses and releases. At first, the pigment seems too bold against your pale skin, but it quickly fades into something subtler, a glow that catches the candlelight and suggests the warmth of someone who has just stepped in from a brisk walk. Of course, you have taken no such walk. Your morning has been spent indoors in the calm fragrance of the nursery, but the rouge tells a different story, one that the world is more willing to believe. You are told this is not vanity, but prudence. In rooms lit only by candles or the dim winter sun, a pale face can look sickly, even if perfectly healthy. A touch of rouge promises vitality, a spark of life to reassure onlookers that all is well. It also softens the edges of your expression, giving you a constant hint of amiability, whether you feel it or not. Better to appear warm than to risk seeming cold, your governess says, adjusting the bow in your hair as the maid works. The rouge carries a faint, sweet scent from the rosewater, which lingers long after the application. It is subtle compared to the jasmine in your hair or the perfume at your wrists, but it adds another layer to the carefully built impression you present to the world. In the same way a frame enhances a painting, the rouge frames your face, guiding the eye toward the features the household wishes to display.
Sometimes the application is done in the salon rather than the nursery, particularly if guests are expected. On those days, you sit very still in a high-backed chair while the maid kneels beside you, dabbing the rouge in quick, practiced motions. You can feel the attention it draws, not just from the women, who nod approvingly at the result, but from the faint hush in the room, as though everyone recognizes the transformation taking place. In that moment, you are no longer simply a child. You are a small reflection of the adult graces expected in your future. The rouge pot itself is kept with care. It is wrapped in silk when not in use, to protect it from dust and from drying too quickly. You once saw the maid scrape the last of an old cake into a mortar, mixing it with fresh powder to stretch its life a little longer. She murmured something about the expense of cochineal, how it comes from far-off lands where the insects are gathered and dried in the sun, each one no larger than a grain of rice. You could not picture such a place, but you understood that even this tiny dab of color carried with it the weight of distance and effort. When the process is done, your reflection in the small hand mirror shows a face that looks slightly more awake, more present, as though the rouge has called you into the room. You do not yet know that one day you will apply it yourself, adjusting the hue and placement according to the fashion of the moment or the demands of the evening. For now, it is simply another piece of the morning's gentle theater, one more quiet adjustment before you are considered ready to be seen. And as you leave the nursery or the salon, you carry the rouge with you, not just on your cheeks, but in the knowledge that every surface of you, hair, breath, skin, has been shaped for the benefit of the gaze that will fall upon it. The color may fade as the day wears on, but the impression it leaves, like the faint scent of rosewater in the air, is part of a story that will follow you for years, that beauty is never left to chance, and that even the smallest flush can be painted into existence.
Your hands have never been left entirely bare to the air. Even when the weather is mild and there is no reason for warmth, you are taught to wear gloves, not merely as protection, but as another extension of your toilette, another surface through which scent and texture announce your place in the world. The first pair, made especially for you, arrives in a narrow box lined with tissue, the gloves themselves cut from the thinnest kid leather, pale cream in color, with stitching so fine it looks almost drawn rather than sewn. They are soft as skin itself, but when you slip your fingers inside for the first time, you notice something even more curious: the faint, lingering fragrance that clings to the lining. These are lace-scented gloves, lined not only with silk, but with tiny sachets sewn invisibly between the layers. The sachets are filled with dried rose petals, crushed to a softness that releases their perfume when warmed by the heat of your hands. At first, the scent is subtle, rising only when you flex your fingers or adjust the gloves at the wrist. Over time, the warmth of your skin coaxes it into the air, until anyone near you would notice it as surely as the perfume at your throat. Putting them on becomes a ritual in itself. The maid rolls each glove halfway down, slides your hand into the finger sheaths one at a time, then eases the rest up over your wrist, smoothing out any tiny wrinkles. She tugs gently at the base of each finger to ensure there is no slack, then fastens the small pearl button at the wrist. You are told to move your hands slowly for a moment, letting the gloves settle into place, the scent from the sachets waking as the leather warms. There are rules, of course. Gloves must never be worn while eating, and when removed, they should be folded neatly with the fingers pointing toward you, never balled or tossed aside. In company,
You may remove only the right glove when offering your hand to someone, leaving the other in place as a kind of polite armor. Your mother tells you that a lady's gloves say as much about her as her shoes or her hair, and that scenting them is not just for pleasure. It is a sign of foresight, of considering the impression you make even before words are exchanged.
The fragrance inside your gloves is refreshed regularly. Every few weeks, the maid carefully opens a tiny seam along the lining, replaces the petals with fresh ones from the still room, and sews it shut again, with stitches so small you cannot see where they begin or end. Sometimes the rose is replaced with violet, or a blend of lavender and lemon balm, depending on the season or the mood of the household. The sachets are never overfilled. Too much scent would be considered vulgar, and so the perfume is always a hint, never a cloud. Wearing the gloves changes how you move. You find yourself more aware of your hands, of how they rest in your lap or lift to adjust a ribbon. The smooth leather makes you careful when touching things, less inclined to grab or fidget. Even as a child, you begin to feel that your hands are not entirely your own, but part of the presentation you carry into each room. The scent becomes so familiar that you notice its absence instantly when the gloves are off, as if your hands have been left naked not just to the air, but to the eyes of others. On days when visitors come, the gloves are paired with a fan or a small book, so that your hands are never empty. The maid might quietly remind you to hold your fingers just so, allowing the lace at the cuff to show against the edge of your sleeve. It is an unspoken performance, the kind in which every detail is noticed but never mentioned aloud. In the evenings, when the gloves are removed and laid flat in their box, the scent still clings faintly to your skin, mingling with the other perfumes of the day. As you drift towards sleep, you sometimes lift your hand to your face without thinking, catching the ghost of roses or violets that has seeped into you as surely as the lessons about posture, manners, and grace. You do not yet realize that in the world you are growing into, scent will be as much a signature as your handwriting. And these gloves are your first introduction to the idea that even the touch of your hand should tell a story.
The day ends, and yet your grooming continues long after you have been dismissed from the salon or the drawing room. In the soft lamplight of the nursery, the maid begins the nightly hair rituals that have already become as familiar to you as the scent of the pillow you sleep on. You sit on a low, cushioned stool, your feet dangling, while she stands behind you with a brush whose handle has been polished to a dull glow from years of use. The bristles, made of boar hair, are firm but not sharp, and they move through your hair in long, rhythmic strokes that seem designed as much to soothe the mind as to tidy the strands. The brushing is counted, 100 strokes exactly. The number is not an estimate, not a rough tradition. It is observed with precision, as though each stroke contributes equally to the health of your hair. The maid counts softly under her breath, the sound blending with the creak of the stool as you shift, and the faint rustle of her skirts when she leans forward. Each pass gathers a little of the day's pomade and powder, smoothing it evenly so that your hair retains its shape and scent until morning. When the last stroke is finished, your hair is parted neatly and wrapped in a length of fine silk. The silk is smooth and cool at first, then warming quickly against your scalp. It is tied just firmly enough to hold everything in place, the knot resting high so you can lie down without discomfort. You are told this prevents tangles and protects the sheen, but also, though only in whispers, it keeps the style from being entirely lost by morning, should the day ahead require you to appear ready with little notice. There are other, more peculiar habits too. The maid has told you stories of great ladies who sleep sitting up, their heads propped on padded supports so elaborate they resemble small furniture.
They do this, she says, to preserve elaborate hair arrangements for days at a time, sometimes even a week. You picture it as she speaks, the stillness, the care it must take not to let the head tilt, and you wonder if that could ever be comfortable. She assures you that you are not yet expected to attempt such feats, but the idea hangs in the air like a glimpse of the world ahead.
Before you are tucked into bed, a little scented powder is patted along your hairline, both to absorb any stray moisture and to refresh the fragrance. Tonight it is a blend of powdered iris root and a trace of violet, chosen, the maid says, to match the sachets in your pillows. As she works, she hums a slow, repetitive tune that matches the pace of her hands. The sound becomes part of the ritual as much as the brush or the silk, so that on the rare occasions when someone else tends to you, you notice the absence immediately. Your bed itself participates in the care. The pillowcases are of linen, not cotton, because linen breathes better, and they are laundered with a rinse of rosemary water. 2 small sachets of dried lavender are tucked into the pillow's corners, their scent faint but steady through the night. The canopy above your bed shields you from drafts, but it also holds in the fragrance, making the air around your head a little pocket of familiarity and comfort. Lying back, you feel the silk wrap snug against your head, the day's scents mingling in the quiet, the jasmine pomade, the faint spice of the gloves you wore, the sweetness of violet powder, and the clean sharpness of the vinegar wash from the morning. The mixture is your own, though you did not create it, and you drift towards sleep as though sinking into a cloud of everything the day has touched. Just before the candle is snuffed, the maid smooths the edge of the blanket and tucks it close under your chin. She checks the knot of the silk one last time, then wishes you a good night in a voice low enough that it feels like a secret. As darkness settles, the care of your hair feels like more than vanity. It is a kind of promise that each morning you will wake already halfway prepared for whatever the day demands. And in the quiet moments before sleep takes you, you think, not for the first time, that perhaps the rituals at night are even more comforting than the ones in the morning, for they ask nothing of you but stillness, and reward you with the feeling of being carefully, thoroughly kept.
By the time you are old enough to listen at doors, you begin to notice that not all the beauty in your world comes from the things you see. Some of it lives in the whispered exchanges between older women, the quiet trading of toilet secrets that are never written down, as if sharing them aloud were already a breach of propriety. These moments happen most often at the dressing table, when visitors have left and the room is soft with lamplight, the air heavy with the mingled scents of the day's perfumes. You are never addressed directly, yet you are allowed to linger nearby, perhaps because they think you are too young to understand, or perhaps because they know this is how such knowledge is best passed along. It starts with vinegar washes. You hear one woman describe how she dilutes hers with rainwater and leaves it in a crystal decanter, ready to dab along her neck and underarms when the weather grows warm. Another swears by adding crushed mint leaves for freshness, though she admits it tingles more than she likes. They laugh over the memory of a friend who once applied neat vinegar without dilution and was forced to hide indoors for 2 days until the sharp scent wore off. These are not the lessons found in etiquette books. They are the small adjustments, the improvised fixes for the days when there is no time for full toilette. Then there are the powders. One woman claims that dusting a pinch into her shoes keeps her feet cool during long hours of standing, while another boasts that she scents her powder with ground cinnamon to give herself a secret warmth in winter. You imagine these women walking through the city, carrying with them not only the visible signs of elegance, but also these hidden touches, an invisible comfort that no one would guess at unless they were told. Perfumed handkerchiefs are a constant topic. They discuss which scents last the longest, which fade too quickly, and how to layer fragrances so they mingle without clashing. One tells of carrying 2 handkerchiefs,
one scented with lavender for polite company and another with musk for private meetings. The distinction makes the others smirk knowingly, and though you cannot yet grasp the full meaning, you feel the weight of it, the suggestion that scent can speak in ways words cannot.
They speak, too, of going days without a true bath, not because they lack the means, but because it is thought better to preserve the skin by avoiding water's harshness. Instead, they rely on what they call dry bathing, wiping the body with linen soaked in scented vinegar, dusting generously with powders, and changing linen garments more often. One woman insists this keeps her skin softer than any soap could, while another confesses she misses the feel of warm water but dares not indulge more than twice a month for fear it will thin the blood. Some advice drifts into the realm of the curious. A woman recommends chewing parsley to keep the teeth white, though another warns it might cause an unbecoming green tint to the lips. Someone else suggests a rinse of rosemary tea for the hair, left to dry in the sun, but is quickly reminded that such exposure will undo all the work of preserving a pale complexion. The conversation turns to clever tricks, carrying a small tin of rouge in one's pocket for emergencies, keeping a pomander at the ready when passing through crowded streets, or sprinkling perfume onto the hems of gowns so the scent rises subtly when walking. What strikes you most in these moments is not the content of the secrets, but the tone in which they are shared, half conspiratorial, half practical, always softened by laughter. They speak as if beauty is a craft, one learned slowly, shaped by trial and error, and passed along like a cherished recipe. You begin to see that the toilette is not simply a sequence of steps, but a set of skills, each one adaptable, each one carrying the mark of the woman who practices it. As you listen, you start to understand that survival in this world is not only about appearing well kept when there is time to prepare, but about maintaining the illusion when there is not. To have these tricks in reserve is to ensure that the mask never slips, that the image remains intact even in the most hurried of moments. And though you are still years away from keeping your own set of secrets, you know that you are already gathering them, one whisper at a time. The morning is cool, and the air beyond the nursery windows carries the faint mingling of damp stone, early bread ovens, and the sharp tang of horse traffic from the street, yet you are not taken out to breathe it freely, not without preparation. Today is a promenade day, one of those occasions when you are paraded through the public gardens or along the arcaded walkways, not for your exercise, but for your presentation. The promenade is a stage, and your every step is part of the performance. The preparations begin earlier than usual. Your gown is chosen not for comfort, but for its effect in movement, a fabric that will catch the light and sway gently as you walk. The stays are tightened just a touch more than on ordinary days, and your hair is smoothed into orderly curls, fixed with enough pomade to withstand a breeze. A ribbon in a calculated shade, neither too pale to fade into the background nor so bright as to be called forward, is tied at the crown. Perfume is applied with special care, not the soft whisper of orange blossom used in the nursery, but a more noticeable blend, musk at the base, tempered with a touch of bergamot and the faintest thread of jasmine. This mixture is dabbed along your neck and wrists, and even brushed lightly over the hem of your gown, so that with each step, the air stirs a trace of it upward. Gloves are smoothed onto your hands, their sachets freshened with dried lavender just that morning. In your hand, you carry a small fan, not to cool yourself, but to punctuate your movement, the flick of silk or feather marking your pauses like a conductor's baton. Once in the garden, the world feels both open and contained. Sunlight filters through the leaves, glinting off the surface of fountains where ducks glide lazily. Gravel paths crunch beneath your shoes, each step deliberate so as not to scuff the leather. The arcades echo faintly with the murmurs of other promenaders. Ladies in pastel gowns, gentlemen in coats of deep wool, all moving in an unspoken choreography of display.
Every head is subtly turned toward one another, every glance measuring, cataloging, comparing. The air here is heavy with scent, though not from the flowers alone. Pomanders swing from chatelaines, fans carry the lingering perfumes of private rooms, and the warm breeze stirs the mingled fragrance of 100 carefully chosen blends. It is a living gallery of olfactory signatures, each one announcing something about the wearer before a single word is exchanged. As you pass, you feel the gazes sweep over you, noting the brightness of your ribbon, the precision of your hair, the way the gloves match the shoes.
You are guided along by your mother or governess, stopping at intervals near a bench or by the edge of a fountain, ostensibly to rest, but really to offer a better view to those nearby. Your task is to remain composed, to keep your shoulders back and your chin level, and to move with the kind of unhurried grace that suggests you have nowhere urgent to be, because urgency in this world is unbecoming. A lady should always appear as though time itself bends to her pace. Sometimes you are introduced to acquaintances. The governess murmurs a name and you make a small curtsy, lowering your gaze just enough to suggest modesty without losing the awareness of your surroundings. A gloved hand is offered to you in greeting, and you extend yours in return, the scent of your gloves mingling briefly with theirs before you part. Words are exchanged above your head, but the important part, the impression, has already been made. The promenade is also an opportunity for subtle competition. You notice how the other children are dressed, which perfumes drift faintly in their wake, whether their ribbons lie flat or twist in the breeze. You do not think of it as rivalry yet, but you understand instinctively that each of you is part of a silent display, each detail weighed and remembered by those who watch. When the circuit of the gardens is complete, you are escorted back through the arcades, the rhythm of your steps matching the echo of the crowd. The governess praises your composure, noting only once that you should hold your fan a touch lower next time, so as not to obscure the ribbon in your hair. You return home with the faint dust of the gravel on your hem and the lingering impression of having been both observed and measured. Back in the nursery, as the gloves are slipped off and the ribbon untied, you feel a quiet relief in shedding the promenade's demands. Yet part of you also understands that these public outings are rehearsals as much as they are performances. They are training you not only to be seen, but to be remembered by the lift of a chin, the sway of a gown, and the faint perfume that trails behind you like the last note of a song.
You are nearly old enough to decide between two ribbons without consulting a committee when the household decides you are ready for a grown woman's experiment. The dangerous seduction of white lead. It arrives in a small enamel pot, innocent. They call it ceruse, and they speak of it as if it were a kindness, a veil that will smooth away childish blotches and coax your skin into the cool perfection preferred by candlelight. You lift the lid and tap the surface with a fingertip. The powder is impossibly fine, like frost ground to dust, and it carries a mineral chill that feels virtuous at first touch. The governess hovers, half proud and half concerned, and the maid, more practical than both, sets out the implements: a hare's foot brush, a velvet puff, and a dish where a few drops of vinegar have been stirred into the powder until it becomes a pale paste. Chalk and sourness married into something that shines softly in the lamplight. Just a whisper, your mother says, which, in this house, is historically the prelude to a full conversation. Still, they begin with restraint, dabbing a crescent along your cheek and another across your forehead, smoothing until the sheen settles and the pores disappear, or at least pretend to.
It tingles, only a little at first, like standing too close to the window on a winter morning, the kind of sting you tell yourself signals refinement. The color is uncanny in the mirror, pale, deliberate, a porcelain version of your ordinary face. Someone laughs softly and says the word ethereal, which you understand to be a compliment that excuses a multitude of discomforts. The powder blurs the childish freckles at your nose and turns shadow into glow. It also, you notice, turns warmth into absence. Your face looks calm enough to belong to a saint, though your skin is beginning to hum like a high-plucked string. They talk, as they always do while they work. The governess offers the mainstream confidence of the age. A smooth white skin is a sign of leisure, a proof that you are untouched by sun and toil, a sheet of flawless paper upon which good breeding writes its name. The maid, who has seen more than she says, offers the quieter fact that certain ladies, famous ones, whispered with equal parts admiration and alarm, have been using this very mixture for years, and that it agrees with some faces better than others. You look at her in the mirror and understand that agrees is a polite way of saying has not yet betrayed them. They add a little rouge because even marble must look alive, and then a dusting of rice powder to set everything in place. You are instructed not to smile too widely, not to touch your cheeks, not to lean your face against gloved hands or feather fans, because the perfection on your skin is also a map, easily smudged. When you inhale, you catch a faint metallic breath beneath the rosewater, an undernote like a penny pressed to the tongue, so soft you might imagine it, except imagination does not make your skin prickle.
You make your first ceremonial tour of the salon in your new complexion, and the room rewards you with approving glances that feel like curtsies returned. The carmine at your lips glows brighter against the white. Your eyes look larger, deeper, framed by the faint kohl you're still allowed. Everyone is very pleased. You, trying to sip politely at a glass of watered wine, discover the first joke that the powder plays. The rim of the glass collects a perfect pale print of your sip, as if the goblet is now wearing a mask of you. Another joke follows when an elderly aunt kisses your cheek and recoils a fraction too late. Half the aunt's affection remains on your face, the other half transfers to her. You both pretend nothing has happened, which, in your world, counts as elegance. By afternoon, the tingle has promoted itself to a quiet throb at the temples. The maid notices first and loosens the stays a touch, the household's universal prescription for every ill short of thunderstorm. She dabs your skin with a puff dusted in orris, as if perfume could negotiate with chemistry. You promise yourself that you are fine, because being fine is an expectation that wears prettier shoes than being honest. Toward evening, when the candles are trimmed and the air grows warm, your skin whispers a less negotiable truth. Beauty sometimes stings, and once in a while, it bites. The maid, bless her contraband wit, offers a quirky antidote. She pulls a pair of tiny wax plumpers from a drawer, little ovals meant to tuck just inside the cheek to round the face where Cyrus flattens it too religiously. You try them and nearly giggle around the secret, cheeks suddenly cherubic, words slightly theatrical. She also, with a conspirator's flourish, produces a drawer mouse, yes, an eyebrow made of mouse skin, trimmed fine as a wisp, to demonstrate how certain ladies repair eyebrows thinned by too much harsh wash. You decline the mouse with gratitude and a very straight face. The governess pretends not to see either object, which is a skill she has sharpened to a professional point. As the night wears on, the powder changes allegiance.
What looked like dew at noon settles into the fine lines at the corners of your eyes that you swear did not exist this morning. When you smile, the surface cracks into a delicate map, and a maid with the reflexes of a court fencer swoops in to pat and blur before anyone else can read it. You learn to smile with your eyes alone, which, to be fair, has always been excellent policy. The third gentle joke of the day arrives when a gentleman bows so low his wig brushes your sleeve. Both of you rise wearing a little of each other, and the exchange is so perfectly mutual that it could almost be called friendship. Later, in the privacy of the nursery, the unmaking begins, which is always longer than the making when danger has been invited to the party. The maid works with oil first, sweet almond to soften the seal, then wipes with linen dipped in vinegar water to lift the paste, changing cloths as soon as they cloud. The basin becomes a pale, troubling soup. You watch, fascinated and faintly horrified, as the mirror gives back the old you in stages, like a moon shedding its light over a restless sea. When the last remnant is gone, the skin beneath is both very clean and a little too pink, as if it has opinions it is not yet ready to voice. A balm follows, beeswax and rose, and the relief is immediate, a cool sigh after a long conversation with the wrong suitor.
The mainstream fact, presented without embroidery, white lead beautifies by poison. It corrodes slowly, it dries the skin, it steals color you did not consent to lose, and if you court it too long, it takes larger trophies: hair, teeth, steadiness of hand. Everyone knows at least one story that begins with radiance and ends with gloves worn indoors to hide the toll. The quieter, stranger tidbit, filed under things you'd never guess until someone's aunt swears by them, a scrap of soft bread kept in a pocket is said to blot the face more gently than any cloth, the crumb pressed to the cheek to lift shine without disturbing paint. Beauty maintenance by bakery, as it were. You try it once and decide the bread has a better life feeding birds, though you admire the ingenuity. You make a private pact with yourself that is not quite rebellion and not quite surrender. You will wear the white veil when rooms demand it and when candles conspire against unpainted honesty, but you will not let it live on your face. You will let your skin breathe between performances. You will learn the older arts better, how to angle your place near a candle so the light flatters, how to drink water, how to sleep on clean linen and favor vinegar over soap, and how to deploy a fan to cast a small, merciful shadow over imperfections that are mostly inventions anyway. You will, in short, prefer theater to surgery. As you lie down, hair wrapped, cheeks newly calm, you touch your temple and feel only skin, grateful, scolded, wiser by a tingle. The day has taught you something essential in a whisper you will not forget, that some luxuries arrive bearing their own bill, and that the signature at the bottom is written, line by invisible line, across the very thing they claim to perfect. Tomorrow, you will be powdered with rice and painted with carmine and fragranced with orange blossom and violet, and you will walk through a world that applauds a certain shine. But tonight, you let the candle go dark and trust the quiet to do its work. In the dark, you smile, not too widely, out of habit, and think of the drawer mouse, that tiny eyebrow imposter lying in its velvet bed like a furry punctuation mark. The image makes you laugh softly into the pillow, a proof that humor is sometimes the gentlest cleanser, loosening what the vinegar cannot reach. You fall asleep promising yourself moderation, which is to say, you drift into dreams in which your reflection keeps its own counsel, and your skin belongs, for a few blessed hours, entirely to you.
There is a quiet hour, just after the white lead experiment has faded from your skin, but before the memory of it has faded from your mind, when you sit at the small writing desk near the nursery window. Today, the household has decided you are old enough to send a perfumed letter, a gesture far older than you, older than the house itself, and wrapped in layers of meaning you only partly grasp. It begins with paper, not any paper, but thick sheets of creamy rag stock, so smooth under your fingers that they feel almost damp. When you hold one up to the light, you can see faintly the watermark of the papermaker, a crowned emblem surrounded by looping vines. The ink is prepared in a small glass inkwell, and beside it rests a quill trimmed just for you, its nib fine enough to make each letter sharp. Before the first word is written, the air around the desk is already thick with scent. A small bottle of bergamot water stands open, its top gleaming in the morning light. The maid dips the corner of a folded linen into it and brushes it lightly along the margins of the page, careful not to let the perfume blur the space where the ink will go. The fragrance blooms immediately, bright, slightly bitter, with a warmth underneath like sunlight through citrus leaves. You write slowly, the quill scratching in deliberate arcs, forming the lines dictated to you by the governess. The message itself is simple, a polite greeting to a family friend, but each word is chosen as carefully as the ribbon in your hair. At intervals, the governess pauses you, reminding you to hold your shoulders back, to avoid smudging the ink with your hand. You are not only writing, you are performing the act of correspondence, learning that the way you form the letters is as much a message as the words themselves. Once the writing is finished and the ink left to dry, the page is folded into thirds, edges aligned so precisely that they could be measured. Here is where the ritual turns from writing to scenting in earnest. A second cloth, this one steeped in a mixture of bergamot and a touch of ambergris, is brushed over the outer folds. It is not enough to saturate the paper, heaven forbid the scent should stain, but just enough to create an invisible aura that will awaken when the letter is unfolded miles away.
Then comes the sealing. A stick of deep red wax is lit, the flame catching and bending the wax into a slow, fragrant drip onto the fold. Before it cools, the maid presses the household seal into it, a crest of curling leaves and a pair of doves, leaving the mark raised and sharp. This too carries scent, for the seal itself has been stored in a box with a pomander. When the impression lifts, it releases a faint echo of clove and lemon that mingles with the bergamot already on the page. The letter is placed in an envelope, which receives its own light dusting of scent from a sachet kept in the writing desk drawer. The sachet contains dried orange peel, rose petals, and a scrap of linen that has been steeped in musk. You are told that this ensures the fragrance will survive the journey, even if the letter passes through the damp, smoky air of the city or rests for days in the musty satchel of a courier. There is, you learn, a kind of etiquette to this. Too much scent is gauche, suggesting desperation. Too little, and the gesture is wasted. The goal is to leave a trace that will rise subtly when the letter is opened, lingering just long enough for the recipient to imagine the writer's presence in the room. Your governess assures you that a perfectly perfumed letter can be remembered for years, its aroma tucked away in the folds of someone's memory as vividly as any phrase written upon it. When the letter is finished, you watch it carried away in a gloved hand, knowing that somewhere beyond the garden walls, it will be opened by someone who will catch the bergamot and think of you, or at least of the careful image of you the household has composed. You feel a small thrill at the thought, not yet understanding how powerful it can be to send a piece of yourself out into the world, wrapped in fragrance. Later, when you pass the writing desk again, the air still holds a faint echo of the bergamot. It clings to the quill, to the wax seal, even to the wood of the table, as though the act of writing and scenting has left its own signature behind. You pause, breathing it in, and think, without quite knowing why, that there may come a day when a letter and the perfume it carries says more about you than your voice ever could.
Time moves, as it always does, without announcing itself, and you begin to notice that the rituals of your toilette, once light and almost playful, now take a little longer to disguise the changes in your face. It is not that you have grown old, you are still far from that, but the freshness that once seemed effortless now requires more coaxing. The women around you notice it before you do. Their glances linger on your temples, the corners of your mouth, the softness under your chin. The powders are pressed a little more carefully, the rouge a touch deeper, the pomade applied with greater patience, as though each detail is an attempt to hold something still. The powders that once sat like morning frost on your skin now sometimes gather in the faintest lines, lines you swear you have not earned. The rouge that once gave you a healthy glow now must be blended more deliberately, for the skin beneath no longer reflects it in quite the same way. The scents you wear shift too, heavier perfumes, richer bases, as if to anchor you with gravity rather than lift you with lightness. Musk finds its way into your orange blossom, amber into your violet water. They cling to you longer, but they also seem to speak more loudly of the effort it takes to keep them present. Your hair remains a crown, but it no longer falls into place with the easy obedience of youth. The curls need more coaxing, the pomade a stronger hand. The jasmine is still there, but beneath it, you can sense the quiet discipline of keeping each strand in its appointed place. The silk wrappings at night are tied with the same precision, yet in the morning, the waves they preserve are a little less buoyant, a little more in need of brushing to life. You notice it most in the mirror before an evening promenade. The governess, now older herself, takes longer with the fan she tucks into your hand. She straightens your gloves, lingers over the bow at your wrist, adjusts the angle of your hat once, twice, 3 times. Perfect, she says, though you hear the pause before the word. You are beginning to understand that perfection, like perfume, is something that must be reapplied before it fades. The younger women in the garden wear lighter scents, brighter ribbons. Their gloves are newer, their steps less rehearsed. You catch their glances, sometimes curious, sometimes appraising, and you realize you have crossed an invisible line, from being watched simply because you were there, to being watched because you must prove you still belong. The change is subtle, like the first cool breath of autumn on a late summer day, but it is there.
The mainstream fact, acknowledged in hushed tones among the older courtesans, is that the toilette becomes more elaborate with age, not only out of vanity, but out of necessity. Skin loses its natural bloom, hair its easy luster, and fragrance alone cannot disguise it all. The quirky, whispered tidbit, shared with a half-smile, is that some women swear by sleeping with slices of raw potato pressed beneath silk at the eyes to banish puffiness, while others apply thin veils of egg white to tighten the skin before evening appearances, walking about the dressing room with faces stiff as porcelain masks until the moment comes to rinse them away. In the quiet of the nursery, no longer yours alone, but still where your night rituals are performed, you feel the difference in the way the maid tends to you. She works with more care, more patience, and perhaps more tenderness, as if she knows the value of each preserved detail. The silk she wraps around your hair is smoothed flat with her palms, the powder at your temples patted in the gentlest strokes. She does not say it, but her hands tell you she understands the work it takes to keep beauty steady in the face of time. When you close your eyes at night, the scents are still there, the jasmine, the musk, the violet, and they are still yours. Yet you know they rest on a surface that changes, however slowly, with each passing year. It is not a loss, exactly, but a reminder. Beauty in this world has always been part artifice, and artifice must always adapt. You breathe it in, and you sleep knowing that tomorrow's toilette will take as long as it needs, and that the mirror will once again be persuaded to tell the story you wanted to tell.
You wake to a morning that moves more slowly than the rest, though no one says why, and you understand without being told that today the rituals will be smaller and closer to the skin, a distillation of everything you have learned about care, fragrance, and presentation. The room is quiet, the kind of quiet that holds its breath, and the light is kind to you, sifted through curtains that have watched you grow from a powdered infant into a woman who knows the weight and mercy of a good comb. The maid arrives first, the same one who long ago learned your hair's mind,
and she greets you in a voice that turns every syllable into wool. Your chair is drawn nearer to the window. The brush appears, that familiar boar-bristle instrument of peace, and the strokes begin, slower now, counted more by feeling than by numbers, because the arithmetic of comfort has replaced the arithmetic of gloss. 1, and the day grows a little wider. 2, and the air remembers jasmine. 3, and every year that led to this morning folds itself neatly and waits. A ribbon is chosen, cream, not to proclaim, but to listen, and tied just high enough to lift the face without asking the neck for anything strenuous. There is no talk of white lead, not today. Rice powder is sifted lightly over the forehead and along the nose, soft as breath on a mirror, and a meeker circle of carmine finds your cheekbones, not to persuade anyone of youth, only to suggest you have come this far with warmth and tact. Your lips meet a small brush dipped in beeswax and rose, and you allow yourself a private smile at how very many glasses you have kissed into remembering you. When the smile threatens to make a new crease, you let it finish anyway. A new map cannot hurt a traveler who has already seen the world. Your gloves are the pale kid ones with the secret stitched-in sachets. The maid fastens them carefully, tugging the seams until they flatter your fingers, and for a brief moment you flex your hands just to wake the roses inside. The scent rises as obediently as a well-trained note, and you think of the first time you wore such gloves, how shy your hands felt, how they learned to tell stories without smudging anything. The fan is brought, not the leather flirtation of younger days, but the silk one painted with a quiet landscape, a path that disappears into trees you cannot see beyond. You hold it, and it feels like memory given hinges.
Your gown is lace and habit, familiar seams, a bodice that forgives, skirts that move as if they remember your steps better than you do. A drop of orange blossom finds the hollow at your throat. Bergamot brushes the wrists, and, in a small act of stagecraft perfected across decades, the hem of your dress is kissed with a whisper of musk so that your presence still rises when you pass, like the last page of a book lifting in a reader's hand. The room gathers itself around you, the mirror's patience, the comb's old jokes, the cushion's memory of your weight. When the governess, older, softer, and finally willing to let affection show up unpowdered, arrives, she corrects nothing. She only smooths the ribbon once, as if to bless it, and places on your dressing table the enamel pot with the faded pastoral scene, not because you need it, but because some talismans feel better within reach. She sits. You sit. For a while, the two of you share the grand luxury of saying nothing at all. The maid brings a small dish and a porcelain spoon. Milk, this time, not for strength, but for kindness to a mouth that has told enough stories. You taste honey. You taste the aftertaste of years in which sweetness often arrived late, but stubbornly arrived. A fan fold of linen dipped in orange flower water cools your brow. Someone opens the window just enough for the city to send in its edited self. Bread, stone, a distant wheel, and a sky rehearsing a color you can never quite name. The mainstream fact stands beside you without fuss. When death knocks politely at 18th-century doors, households lay out their beloved with sprigs of rosemary and flowers, not only because they believe scent purifies bad airs, but because remembrance has a fragrance, and everyone knows it. And the quirky tidbit whispered like a smile behind a veil. A few ladies of your acquaintance have long kept little silk mouche, beauty patches cut as hearts or stars, tucked in their jewel boxes. One insists a final patch at the left temple for wit is never out of place, even when conversation has ended. You consider the star and choose a crescent, moonlit humor to the last. There is no fear, only choreography you know by heart. The unmaking will come later, performed by hands that learned from your hands how to be kind. A lock of hair will be wrapped in ribbon, yes, the cream one, and kept where fingers can find it without ceremony. Someone will set your fan beside a prayer book,
as if air and words might agree to take turns. A small pomander will be hung by your bed, its cloves and dried orange peel doing what they always did best, telling the nose not to worry. For now, you are dressed, you are finished, and you are beginning. You stand with help, and the room stands with you, and the path in the painted fan looks less like an ending than a hallway with better manners. You breathe, the roses in your gloves breathe back, the rice powder lifts a little in the light like the faintest weather. When you sit once more, your shoulders remember every promenade, your lips remember every letter sealed in warm wax, and your skin, fresh from the gentlest vinegar, remembers that life has forever been a duet between what is felt and what is shown. You close your eyes, not to leave the stage, but to dim the footlights. That is all.
And now the room grows even softer, and the brush you have known becomes only a memory of bristles passing through calm water, and the curtains are a tide that rises and falls without leaving the shore, and you are simply there, in a chair that understands you, while the air lets go of its brightness and keeps only its warmth, and the powder on the dressing table settles into perfect quiet, and the ribbon learns to be a line in a poem instead of a knot, and the fan is just a folded whisper in your hand, and the scent of orange blossom drifts to the edge of the window and rests there like a small white boat at evening. And the city beyond your walls forgets to hurry, and the clatter of wheels becomes a gentle, faraway metronome, and the bells are moth-winged soft, and the garden exhales the last of its daytime light, and the sprig of rosemary waits with patience older than your house, and your gloves, still warm at the wrists, release their roses the way a lullaby releases its last note, and every ritual you ever practice unknots itself into kindness. Brush, ribbon, powder, breath, each one larger than a gesture and smaller than a cloud. And you are carried, not by steps, but by ease, and you drift through familiar halls without walking, through rooms made only of hush and fondness. And your name is the sound a candle makes when it thanks the match, and your reflection is the softest guest. And the fan opens once in a dream and becomes a moon, and the moon becomes a door, and the door opens into a garden where nothing is expected of you but resting, and every flower is exactly as perfumed as you can presently bear. And the path does not need to be chosen, because all paths are pillows now. All journeys are sighs. All endings are explanations asleep inside a beginning. And so you sleep, and the air sleeps with you, and the house keeps watch the way a hand keeps another hand, and the night tucks its lace around your shoulders, and nothing is missing, and everything is gentle.